Hi, and welcome back to Creative Live TV. My name is Kate Dessa, and you are back watching the Work From Home Cafe with Andrew Scrivani. I'm excited to have him back today. He's going to be teaching us how to make scones, both gluten-free and regular scones. This is a recipe that was passed down in his family, and I'm excited to learn more about how to make scones at home and then learn how to take photos of them. So welcome back, Andrew. Nice to have you back.
Hello, welcome back. It's great to be here. Yeah, I mean, we're going to do scones today. So it's only 90 degrees on the East Coast today, and I have the oven at 450. So, you know, it's a great day here in the kitchen. It's not too bad. We put the air conditioning on today. So, although the 450 degree oven is much better here than it is when I'm in my studio where the air conditioning isn't nearly as good. So we'll survive. So this recipe conjures up a lot of history in my family. For me in particular, it's something that is unusual for an Italian family to have as part of their traditions because it's not an Italian recipe. And we are, you know, second and third generation immigrants that basically only ate Italian food growing up. And then there was this sort of interloper of a recipe that came in and became part of our family tradition. And now it's a recipe that gets shared with cousins and aunts and uncles because it was the pastry that was there during coffee, right? So whenever this is my memory of it, whenever the adults would be at my grandmother's house, which was sort of the central hub of the family, they would be eating these scones with coffee. So I never knew that it wasn't not an Italian thing. I just figured, oh, well, this is something we eat. So we ate these little muffin looking things with raisins in them and smeared them with a great amount of butter, and they were terrific. And then what I come to realize is that it's actually not a family recipe. It was actually a friend of the family that ended up teaching it to my grandmother, and then it became sort of the staple. And the other aspect of this was that, you know, like a multi-generational immigrant family, we had multiple generations in one house. So my great-grandmother was there, my grandmother was there, and then we were there all in one home when I was a child. And what was odd, or maybe not odd, was that my grandmother really didn't do a lot of cooking because my great-grandmother did all the cooking in the household. So my grandmother was the baker. So I really learned my love of baking from my grandmother. Her name was Annie. And one of the things she made consistently were these scones. I mean, there were quite a few things that she would make, but I really learned to love baking from being in that house and seeing sort of fresh made baked goods come out. And it was her outlet because she didn't have another cooking outlet. Because my great-grandmother dominated the kitchen. And I dedicated my book to my great-grandmother, but I'm gonna give my grandmother a little bit of love here on Creative Live today. So there's a lot of history in this particular recipe.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So
yeah.
Remind me, scones, I know scones aren't Italian. Remind me, are scones technically French? What is the origin behind scones?
I think scones are English,
Okay.
Irish. It's something that the person who taught it to my grandmother was British. So she was born in England, and she came to the U.S. after World War II and was family friends for many, many years. And then, you know, this recipe sort of was born out of that friendship. So it was interesting that there's a couple of little things about it that make it interesting. And one in particular is the addition of sour cream. Sour cream kind of adds some moisture to it because scones traditionally can be really dry. And if you're eating scones with tea or coffee, it's nice because it's a drier thing. You can dunk it, whatever. But if you want it a little bit more moist, then having the sour cream in there is really nice. So I guess we should get started so we can kind of show the process here because I'm going to go through it a couple of times. So here we go down to tabletop cam. So as you can see, I have 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour.
Okay.
I have 3 teaspoons of baking powder, a half a teaspoon of baking, 2 sticks of butter, 6 tablespoons of sugar, 8 ounces of sour cream, and a cup of raisins. So I'm going to put this other stuff over here for a second. So all of the dry ingredients go in here. We just throw them all in.
So one of the things that I always, this reminded me from our recipe last week, baking is such a precise thing, and you have to have your exact measurements perfect, otherwise it can go haywire really easily. And it reminds me, if in cooking other things, or like curry like we were making last week, it's really not precise, and it's really much more of a feel and taste kind of thing. Baking is very different in that way. And I like to bake a little, but I always find that baking is much more difficult than regular cooking. What's your take on that?
I like the precision element of it. I do love the instinctual feel of cooking, but I also have an affinity for this because I like the precision of it, and I like the scientific aspect of it. It is very precise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this butter up into cubes so that when I cut it into the flour, it starts to make like little pellets. You want it's like a pie crust in a way, where you want to have so this is sort of melted a little bit, but it's mostly room temp. And just going to get them in there, and then I'm probably going to end up using my hands, but I'm going to start by using a fork. I like to get my hands in there when I'm doing it, because you can really control how big those chunks get. But I do love the precision element of baking. It's one of the things that even in my studio, one of the things that I continue to style, even when I have stylists working with me, is I get actively involved in the baking. Most of the people who work with me, my stylists, know that they can count on me to either take on those duties or at least give them a capable hand when we are working with pastries or cakes. I just made a beautiful cake this weekend because I'm not working with stylists at the moment because of COVID. And I made a beautiful strawberry ice cream cake, which technically wasn't baking, but it was still a cake. The decorating part felt like baking. So that's going to come out in the New York Times next week. So what I'm doing now is I put all my dry ingredients in here, and I cut up that butter, and now I'm kind of starting to cut the butter into the flour. So my grandmother used to use either a fork, which is what I'm doing, or a pastry cutter, which kind of looks like this thing with a handle that has like these wires that come across it, like and you use it. Yeah, that's a pastry cutter. And that's what my grandmother also had. I have a couple of antique pastry cutters, and I've used them in the past. But a lot of times, especially after working with Kate McDermott on so many projects regarding pie and dough and crusts, is that I got used to doing it this way and also doing it this way, which is just to kind of start to break the butter in your hands, running it through. It sort of becomes like raggy in your hands, and it moistens everything. It's really nice to do it this way too. And once it's sort of has the consistency that you feel that the butter is equally distributed and the flour is starting to moisten, that's when we'll add our last bit of ingredient and get started on the next part of the process.
And so just one quick question here is how cold was that butter? The temperature of butter that you work with often in making pastries and baking is really important. And it looked like that was still fairly cold butter that you cut into fairly small pieces.
Yep, it was. It was only a little bit melted, only because I took it out right before we got started. But normally I would take it right out of the fridge.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, work with cold butter. I mean, that's one of the keys to certain pastries, is particularly like delicate pastries like pie crust and and croissant and things like that, because you really should be working with colder butter. So this is almost there. You could see that the clumps are sort of like the size of peas. That's sort of what Kate always says. She always says that should be like the size of peas, the little clumps. So, does anybody have any questions so far?
Let's see what
mesmerized
people are. It looks like people are mesmerized right now. We have a lot of people tuning in on Facebook. Let's see. Yes, so we have. I'm telling Zubin that Zubin was wondering what you were baking. Somebody, Marty, jumped in and told him that you are baking some scones. The recipe sounds delicious. I think everyone's excited to see the sour cream element, which is not something that's necessarily known that is a good addition in scones.
Well, wait no longer. So here goes. We got sour cream going in. And this is going to get mixed in along with our raisins. So now that's all our ingredients. And I'm going to mix these up. I may also get my hands back in there, which, I'm wont to do. And I'm just kind of cutting this through. This bowl is probably a little small for this, but we're gonna live with it. And then, of course, this is all going to get rolled out on this countertop once we have a mixture that holds together. So that's going to be soon, because I'm going to get my hands in there.
If you could just scoot the bowl over to your, there we go. That's perfect.
Sorry, I could see that.
It's moving as you're.
Well, I think we're down to a square, right? Because, yeah. So, okay, yeah, I'm sticky, and it's good. It's getting there. Now I'm gonna do these in the way my grandmother used to do them, where she would roll them out to a thickness of about 1/2 inch, and then use like a pastry cutter, not a pastry cutter, like a cookie cutter, like a 2-inch cookie cutter, and then place them on the sheet. But I think I don't have a cookie cutter today, so I have a jar lid that I think is around the right circumference.
Oh, interesting. All right.
Yeah, and I'm going to use that and a knife to make my my circles. So
Andrew Crane from Facebook asks, can you use 2 knives to cut the butter? I assume he means like fold the butter into you were using the fork instead. Would that work?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, any implement that'll help you kind of just get the butter mixed in. I mean, as you saw, I just found it easier to do it with my hands, which I like. When it comes to baking, I really do like getting my hands involved. I have these memories as a child of sitting there on this sort of stool in the kitchen in my grandmother's house, watching her bake, and just always just fascinated by her hands. Now you see how that's kind of coming together into a nice kind of solid mass. All my little pieces are now incorporated. Maybe I can get some more of this off my hands. I did wash my hands, people. Washed them well in the era of many germs. Yeah, and then I have a funny story. So when I was a little boy and I would go up the stairs, because we lived in the basement of my grandmother's house, I would come up and watch her bake. And one time, I'm going to just put a little little flour on my rolling pin. This is a French rolling pin. Again, this is something that I learned from Kate, to use a French rolling pin instead of a standard rolling pin, because by having the tapered edges, you actually can have a little bit more control when you're trying to roll stuff out. So I went upstairs my parents were going to go on vacation, the first vacation like since I was born. So I was maybe like 2.5 or 3 years old. And my grandmother was there entertaining me because, you know, they were going to watch us. Well, not us, me. My brother wasn't born yet. And I sat on that little stool to watch her make the scones. And they came out of the oven and she took them off the sheet pan. And I put my hand straight on the sheet pan. Burned my hand, had to go to the hospital. And my aunt and uncle had to come. And they didn't tell my parents because they didn't want them to come back from vacation. So when they came back, you see I made this little indentation. I'm going to do that a few times, and I'm going to cut them out, and then I'm going to re-roll whatever dough is left and make a few more. So yeah, I was a bit of an imp as a child. My mother dressed me like the devil every Halloween until I was 5. So this is not an ideal way to do this, but it is definitely a way to do it. Okay, so you see I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 so far, and I'm going to cut it out.
And that's just like a little mason jar lid that you have there, right?
Yep, that's it. I just took the lid and I figured this would be a good size because this is the size I remember them being. You know, and a 2-inch cookie cutter is about the same size. So I can take that out. Right, and there I have 1. There it is. I'm going to put it right here on the sheet pan with parchment on it. And this will take us a minute or two to get through. It is dark today. It's very cloudy. So our photography might be a little bit of a challenge today. So we'll see how that goes.
I don't think we've experienced a cloudy day at your house.
No, and it is very cloudy, and I'm supposed to go surfing after this, so that is very disappointing. You know, it's I've become that sort of dedicated surfer where my whole life revolves around the surf report because I have the time to do that these days, and it's really it's something that has kept me sane during this, including CreativeLive has kept me sane. Because I'm not as busy as I normally would be with my 75 jobs. So it's been nice to have both this to look forward to and to be able to get out into the ocean as much as I get out.
Yeah.
So
and is your nephew and his girlfriend still quarantining with you, or is it just you and Sue now?
Just Sue and I, yeah. Nico and Daniela went. They were in Maine this week. They took a little vacation, and then they've been back at their apartment in New York because they're planning on moving soon. So they needed to get back and sort of get themselves oriented. Plus, I think, you know, they're young, and I think they were feeling like very separated from all their friends, and they felt getting back at this point was better, and they socialized with their friends in the park, and they've been very responsible, but also, you know, they needed to get back to their lives. So, so that's good. Less
so now
mouths to
Sue
feed.
is the only one benefiting from all of your delicious Monday cooking.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of our neighbors here at in our place are also now benefiting a little bit because, you know, I'm here and I have more food than people, so I have to share. So our neighbor downstairs is a good friend of ours who had very exciting news announced in the New York. She has been named the publisher of Simon & Schuster. So she she used to be, or still is for the next 2 weeks, she's the executive director of the Pulitzers. And she has gotten this new position. She used to be at the New York Times. That's how we know each other. And her son, Jordan, is my surf partner. And he is also was in my movie. He was in Team Marco. So
nice.
if you see Team Marco, he's a boy that plays Epstein, which is, you know, was I don't know if anybody is familiar with Welcome Back Kotter. Do you remember Welcome Back Kotter?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so there was sort of an in joke in Welcome Back Kotter that there was a Hispanic boy that was named Epstein, and we sort of, I don't know that we were consciously doing it this way, but we have Jordan's black, and having him named Epstein, being from New York, was kind of a cute nod to some of the multicultural sort of aspects of growing up in New York.
Tell us a little bit more about Team Marco. I don't think we've talked about Team Marco on the stream yet. Yeah,
so Team Marco is the story of a boy whose grandfather, multi-generational sort of Italian-American household, where the grandfather had to come in and live with his daughter after his wife has passed, and his house burns. So he and his grandson have some issues, generational issues that we explore, especially the idea of technology, and that older folks are a little confused at how younger people don't really spend any time outside doing things that they did, like playing stickball or being outside playing games. So the story revolves around friendship and gameplay and intergenerational relationships, and it's a really kind of cute, beautiful story, and it's currently under consideration for distribution. We should have an answer by the end of the month, and hopefully we have it out to the public in September. So that's so exciting. That's Team Marco, and my little buddy Jordan is one of my stars. So he's a terrific guy, and his mom has got this exciting new opportunity. So he's who's benefiting from our cooking adventures these days. As you can see, this process requires quite a bit of patience, because you really do need to do this a few times to get it right. So I think we'll probably get 2 more out of this, and then we're perfect. So hopefully we're entertaining you with our scone cutting operation here. I think this last one will just be free form.
Yeah, I think so. So typically, are these scones typically are kind of that diamond shape? Are these just going to end up circles, or are they going to kind of change form while they're baking?
I think they're going to flatten out and probably get a little bit bigger.
Okay.
I'm hoping not too much bigger, so I can show you how we ended up. And let's see how that goes. I'm going to go in the oven for 10 minutes. And while those are cooking, I'm going to start mixing up the gluten-free version, and we can talk a little bit. So again, that was 6 tablespoons of sugar. That was a half a teaspoon of baking soda, 3 teaspoons of baking powder, and then we're going to cut the butter in, which I'm going to do by hand right now. So I'm going to do like this, just to speed up the process a little bit.
And tell me, so is this gluten-free recipe a take that you have created when in adulthood, or was gluten-free something that you and your family used to create when your grandmother used to create when you were a kid?
Oh no, I don't think anybody knew what gluten was.
Yeah, fair.
In the 70s. So I really don't even know if that was something that people did intentionally. I mean, I know that there's a lot of foods, we talk about the new ways of eating gluten-free and vegan and vegetarian and other things. And, one of my friends who's a restaurateur in New York, talks about, she's from Rome, and she talks about how so much Italian food is both vegan and vegetarian, even though it's not something that we have ever really identified that way. So it's not something we actually knew anything about back then. at least my family didn't. I'm not sure who did, because celiac, I don't even think was a diagnosable disease back then. But there are so many great options with ingredients now to be able to do, different variations on favorites. For so many years, even in the beginning, when I first started eating more gluten-free diet, there were very, very few things that could ever muster enough taste or enough texture to replace some of the things that we liked, like pasta and pizza and good breads and, things like pastries and cookies. And now the products are so advanced and so good that we have an opportunity to make these things. So, having these sort of AP style flours to cook with, it really makes a big difference. I mean, I've been able to make all kinds of things with these flours. My first the big CreativeLive class that I taught on food photography featured my friend Shauna Ahern, who's was known as the gluten-free girl. She's now dropped that moniker, but she had her own line of gluten-free flour that I think is very similar to the one I'm using right now. And she was one of the people who sort of gave me a lot of instruction as to how to eat gluten-free. Even though I don't have celiac disease, I have other problems that sort of limit the amount of wheat intake I should have. She was super helpful in getting me to understand how to cook a little differently, how to eat a little differently, and be able to still enjoy the foods that I like. So if you go to my class, or you've taken my class, my CreativeLive class, then you'll know who she is, because we do a little interview and we talk a little bit about gluten-free eating and also about blogging and all of that. So she's a very interesting woman.
And that was your food fundamentals class? I'll drop it in the comments for everyone.
No, it was a food photography class.
Okay.
So, and I think that is that one of the ones that's being offered as a fast class too. I'm not sure. I think it might be.
Yeah, actually that one is. So if you're on the Creator Pass, the Andrew Scrivani's food photography class is now available as a fast class. And just for anyone who doesn't know about fast classes, they are, we've condensed a lot of our longer form classes into 60 to 90 minutes, so you can get all of the great information condensed down. And Andrew's class is a really great fast class, and it is available for anyone who is on our monthly subscription or yearly subscription, which is called the Creator Pass. But I'm going to drop a link down in the comments for you guys to check out this food photography class, which is one of my favorite classes on CreativeLive.
Yeah, I'm in good company too, so that's a nice thing to say. We've got some really great instructors now. We've always had not great instructors, but I think the profile of CreativeLive in recent time has really brought out some pretty stellar people.
Yeah.
And some really, really interesting instructors. So I think that Creator Pass is really worth the price of admission. I know that I take other classes on CreativeLive and I really enjoy them.
I love to hear what our instructors' what classes do you like to take on CreativeLive? Like, I was talking to Vanessa Van Edwards via email the other day, and she was taking a public speaking class, which was really fun to hear. A lot of our instructors, we give our instructors the Creator Pass so they can stay involved and see what we have we're adding to our library, and it's always fun to hear what classes our instructors like to take too.
Well, I'm interested in what particular like other editorial photographers have done. And I know, Joe McNally is somebody that I knew about, from being in that world. And I thought, his take, obviously, because of the nature of what he does, is very interesting. And I always like to watch other sort of editorial sort of photojournalist type photographers work. That's definitely one of the things I like to do on there. But then I also kind of like things like music stuff. Like, I'm pretty interested in what Steve Aoki has to say. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that kind of music. I learned a little bit about it from Nico because it was something that he was interested in, and we were doing some stuff together during the pandemic.
Yeah, you were doing your little cocktail hours while he was DJing, right?
That's right. I mean, it's not the same music because I know that there's some subgenres and things that I don't really understand about that music, but I know that Steve has worked with some artists that I'm really fond of. I know he did a collaboration with Tom Morello, who I also took his Tom Morello's class on a different platform. But I'm really fascinated by electronic music, even though it's not something I particularly listen to, but I think the creation of it is really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. My husband's father is a classical contemporary composer, and he's a professor back in Illinois, where we're from. And most of his students now kind of lean into electronic music, and it's been really fascinating for him to see how composing has really evolved for electronic music. And it's, if you're electronic music is so versatile, and there's so much that goes into it, and there's not the constraints of having a band and having everyone together, that it is a perfect medium for this time that we're living through.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know my wife Sejong, when she was still at the New York Times, did a video piece with Diplo and Skrillex.
Oh, nice.
And it was about how they made that song with Justin Bieber.
Yeah.
And how they crafted that song. And that was a really fascinating sort of look into the way that music got made. And I think that was the thing that sort of got me interested in kind of understanding more about it.
Yeah.
I play guitar. And I'm interested in music as an art form, but I'm also just kind of fascinated by the making of sounds.
Yeah, of course. It's I actually, when I was in college and in my early career days, I was a music writer. And so I spent a lot of time actually writing and doing photography at concerts. And Diplo and Skrillex were some of my very first shows back in Chicago, where I lived, that I wrote about. And it's, I think we speak to this a lot, which is that food and music are similar in the sense that they're universal, but there's so many different interpretations, and it's something that brings us closer, but also allows us to learn about a different culture in a way that other things don't. And I think food and music kind of have that commonality.
Yes, I agree. And the funny thing is that, Sam Sifton, who's the editor of the New York Times food section, who I've been friendly with for many years, since we started, since he started hiring me back in the early 2000s, began, I think it was the New York Observer, writing about music and the downtown scene, as a young man. And we quite often talk about music when we're together. I find that he has got an interesting kind of cultural knowledge of music similar to mine, growing up in New York, being a white kid in New York who has a knowledge of hip hop, because it was a music that, was very much of our era. And I grew up in an integrated neighborhood that, where that music was being, I was being exposed to that music, at its very inception. And I think Sam also sort of took to hip hop as a young man, and he's sort of an odd bird too, in a middle-aged white guy who knows awful lot about hip hop, So.
Well, I'll tease something that I'm working on. I don't know if you ever caught one of the interviews with Steve Sweatpants, who's also a New York. He's a street photographer based in New York. Yeah. He has an agency called Street Dreams Magazine, and they just launched Street Dreams Radio, and we're hoping to do some sort of collaboration on CreativeLive TV, where we highlight some of the music and some of the producers that they're bringing on Street Dreams Radio, which all really speaks to kind of the New York music scene. And I'm really excited to hopefully make that collaboration work out, and that I'm actually talking to them this week and hoping to have them on CreativeLive TV and get some more music onto the ARC feeds. So I'm excited about that potential collaboration.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
As you can see, this is not as sturdy as the other one, but they are holding together, and I think that our other ones are probably right about ready. I'm going to let them go just a bit, and they look to me just like my grandmother's. So that actually worked out. You'll see when we get them out of there. And
so remind us, I'll remind everybody, we're making scones right now with Andrew Scrivani. Andrew is a New York Times food photographer. He is one of our instructors, and this is the Work From Home Cafe. Today, he is teaching us how to make scones, both gluten-free scones, which we're making right now, and in the oven right now are traditional scones. And remind us what is the temperature you have the oven at, and how long are you putting the scones in?
The scones are going in for about 10 minutes. I'm gonna make this last couple by hand, and then get them out. Get the ones out of the oven, and get these in the oven. I haven't experimented with the gluten-free dough yet in terms of making how long this cook time will be, but I'm pretty sure it'll be very similar. As you can see, this is me when I am working with dough. I'm dirty and messy, and I love it. It's just so much fun. All right, where is my oven mitten? Here it is.
Did you ever, growing up, I used to love going to Uno's. Do you remember Uno's, the pizza place?
Of course.
And that was my favorite part as a kid is, they gave you that piece of pizza dough that you got to play with and eat while you were waiting. And that was by far my favorite pizza place growing up because you got to play with the dough.
So, all right, I'm going to clean this off with my bench scraper real quick so I can put these down in front of the camera for you.
All right.
This is called a bench scraper.
All right.
This is
Bob
something
Green from Facebook says we need to get you a set of biscuit cutters.
Yeah, I have them. They're back at the studio. This is the work from home cafe.
Yeah, there we go. So we can't have all of the tools.
Yeah, I just, I got to keep it real, which is actually what it's like when I'm not at my studio where the majority of my cooking gear lives. This is the substitute. So, all right, here we go. You're going to see how they came out. And honestly, they look just like I expected them to.
Oh, those look great.
They rose just a little bit. You can see they got a little puffed up. I'm actually going to crack one open because I want to make sure that they cooked all the way through. And they did. They're nice and soft inside, but they will firm up. Like, it's okay for them to get like a little stale and eat them like with butter on top.
Yeah.
Taste one. Definitely right there. Very nice. These are great.
They look great. And what other kind of dried fruits might you throw in here, or other ingredients instead might you throw in a scone that you think or that you've tried before that worked out really well?
I think cranberries work out really nicely. You see how dark it got in my kitchen? Good job.
We just had someone comment. Actually, my mom, who's now your Facebook friend, said, yes. Andrew, you gotta turn on a light.
Okay.
There we go.
Turn it on to the lights. Hold on. It just got stormy here. That's what happened. It just got really stormy. Cranberries, chocolate chips work really well. Golden raisins work well, not just regular purple raisins. Those things, you can always mix into these scones. I think that the raisins are interchangeable with any of those things. Chocolate chips sounds like a really good idea, by the way.
Yeah, it does.
So I think that's great. let's go solve some problems with the photography on this, because I think
All
that
right,
we're going to have some challenges that we don't normally have here. I'm going to rinse my hands. I'm going to take you guys over there. Maybe I'll take you over there first.
And I think this is actually this is a great test for us, because usually you have all of this beautiful light, and not all of us are as lucky as you to have amazing lighting in their house. So this is going to be a real test.
It is, but I'm going to make it work. You can see that I pulled over the bench that I used for seating, and I'm going to bring the scones over and put them there for a second while I get set up. Am I in a good spot there for you? Can you see?
Yeah, that looks good. All right.
Okay.
This is a real DIY photo shoot we're doing.
Totally, absolutely DIY. This is what Work from Home Cafe is. We are working it out. Okay, so can you see, how's this look from, I don't see the, oh, there it is. Okay.
There we go. Good. Yeah.
Okay, so it looks like I'm going to try to pull as much light out of, I'm going to sit right here so you can see me. There we are. So I'm going to pull as much, I think I cut my head off.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, hold on, I'll set it back up while I set the camera. So I'm going to try to get as much light as I can out of this setup today, but this is part of what we're doing, right? We're learning how to solve the problem of darkness in a home shooting setup. So this might help a lot of people right now. That, you know, it's not always ideal where you have beautiful light all the time, especially at an at-home situation. So I still have these cards that I made up. Remember this guy, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I'm going to put that there to kick some light back in here. Is that going to block the view? Maybe. That's probably not a great idea, but I have an idea.
Okay.
I can solve that problem because we have stools, and we can put you on a stool. How's that? Is that okay?
Let's see. Yep, that works.
Okay. Oh, lightning. Did you see that? Just had some lightning go. That's interesting. I'm going to stand right by this window and hope that I don't get electrocuted. How's that? All right, everyone. I am getting my camera set up, and I'm going to go start at 1600 ISO at 125th of at 4.5. So I'm going to start right there, and I'm going to try to go backlit and see what that does for me. Oh, we're close. We're very close. I'm going to push it to 3200, and I'm actually a little over there. So I'm going to back off to 2500 ISO, and I feel like we're very close to, just on an initial look.
Oh, yeah. Actually, scoot the camera just to your right a little bit. Actually, your left, excuse me. There we go. Oh, yeah, that looks great.
Yeah.
So it's surprising how much that reflector, that white reflector, does for you. Well, because you're still not using any artificial light, and it's still, you can still see that kind of nice warm light off the top of the scone so well.
Yes, absolutely. And then look from the top, you can see it's very clean.
Yeah.
We have a very clean look there from the top. And I can actually maybe even think about, with the top, is taking this out and seeing if that gives me a little bit more drama with the shadowing. And it kind of does. I mean, I'm still feeling pretty good about the...
There we go, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like even without the fill card, I'm still getting enough light on the top, and I'm getting that deeper shadow in the crevices, which is really nice. So a lot of times when I work with pastry I like to shoot it right on the pan where it's made. It just has a very natural sort of organic feel to it. And I'm gonna look around and pick when I do this, whenever we work with food, especially when we work with multiples, you want to pick what we call a hero. And a hero is basically the best looking one of the bunch that you get when you're making cookies or brownies or pastries or whatever. I'm trying to give a nice spacing that looks kind of natural but not too precious. And I picked this one here as my hero. Okay, so I'm going to focus on that one, both from this angle, which is nice, but I think I could use the fill a little bit more for this one. I'm going to put the fill card back in.
While you're doing that, I want to mention Sandy from Scotland said she makes potato scones. Have you ever made a potato scone?
No, but I can understand how it works. I mean, I think I get the general gist of how you would do that, but I think that's really an interesting sort of more
so she says usually they're savory, and she likes to put bacon and sausage in them.
Oh, that sounds amazing, Sandy.
So good.
Sandy, we want those. Okay, so I can scroll back to a couple of the other ones. I did a vertical. Hold on, there we go.
There we go, yeah.
Got a vertical there.
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful.
It's got nice drama. And then I did another overhead. Oh, that's something else.
That's something else delicious.
I think that was the chicken wings. It's still on the card. So we have some nice things here. But what I want to do now is let's get out a cooling rack and do that sort of presentation. Do I have a cooling rack? Let me see.
Can you remind everybody, Bob, Lorraine from Facebook is asking, what lens are you using again? And can you just remind us of your camera and settings?
Of course. I am using right now the 50 millimeter macro 2.5. It's called a compact macro. I actually don't have the cooling rack, but I'm going to use this copper pan that I bought years ago that I don't really use very often, but it's very pretty. And I think that this color will stand out really nicely on it. And it's got some nice texture. So I'm going to pick 4 or 5 of the prettiest ones and go with them.
Do you ever, when you're posing these, do you ever play with depth and maybe stack them a little bit in a photo like this that you're kind of showcasing what they look like after they've been baked? Is something like stacking, does that feel too...
You mean like this?
Yeah, does that feel too posed to you and not realistic?
I've never really been a big fan of that look. Only because when do you ever stack food like that? So it's sort of like a little out of context for me. I know that some people do it, and it's something that, when you're, looking for new and interesting ways to do stuff, it could help to do that. But it's just not something. Well, that copper is really interesting. I don't know if I love it, but it's definitely different.
Yeah, it gives a shadow to those scones in a totally different way.
Yeah, I do have something else here that I think would look nice on. I have this wooden cutting board, which has some really nice green on it. And I'm going to put that down and see how that looks. Because these feel very natural, organic to me. And I think that maybe, you got to remember with food photography, a lot of times you're dealing with food that doesn't have a lot of color.
Yeah.
And you have to sort of kind of find different ways to find a nice presentation. So this looks nice to me, but it needs a little bit of fill in the front. So I'm going to just cheat a little bit and put my camera like this right over the lip of the card. So I'm going to kind of use the card as a as a base, but it was also as my so you can see the difference. I'll go from one to the other.
Okay.
So this is the one I just shot. Whoop. That's the one I just shot. That's the one before. So you see the difference in the light as I flick back and forth? Look at the front of the scone. I know it's really hard to do this on this little tiny screen, but let me see if I can get it positioned in a way.
There we go. There we go. That's perfect.
Okay, so.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
See, dark light, dark
Yeah.
light. So that's the difference for putting that card like that. And that really helps. It makes
such a big difference. You would never like intuitively expect that it makes that significant of a difference.
That right, and it does. And then you know a lot of times like when you do that and you have the camera like peeking over the top of the card, there's other times when I've actually cut a hole in the card and stuck the lens of the camera right there so that I can actually mount the camera with the fill card right on the front of the camera, and it will push light back onto the subject. So that's the nice way to do this. And I have one other little thing I want to try here, because I really don't love the overhead of this, because it doesn't really have a whole lot of color and like enough variation for me to really love what that looks like. So I'm gonna get some. I think I have some jam or something in the fridge that I can put on top and make a little presentation. So hang in there with me for 1 second.
Sandy is telling us to not forget about our gluten-free scones in the oven. I hope they're not getting burnt.
Nope, they're ready.
Okay, did I just hear a timer? Was that perfect timing?
No, it was when I opened my oven, it makes that sound. These look nice. These are a little different. I'll bring a few of those over, let them cool for a minute. How much time we have, Kate?
We have about 8 minutes.
Okay, cool. We have time. So I'm going to make one of these into a little, Sandy, can we eat them with jam? We're getting expert advice. I love it. So I'm going to cut this carefully. These cut just like my grandmother's too. They have this really delicate kind of feel to them. They're just on the verge of crumbly. You could see that.
What kind of jam are you working with?
And I have just a little bit of strawberry, and I don't have a whole lot. I'm actually at the bottom of my jam jar, more in the basement. Had I known I was going to do jam today, I could have brought more jam up, but no, I did not. Okay, so I'm going to do just 1/2 with some jam, and I'm going to leave the knife there sort of as a prop. And let's see, I think I'm going to need my little card trick. And I'm going to get in here. I got that light bouncing off the jam. That's kind of nice. I think a little bit of an angle there would be prettier. Let's see. Oh, yeah. All right. We're getting there. This looks great. I'll show you in a sec. I don't want to keep you waiting too long. But sort of.
Oh, yeah. Oh, scoot. There we go. Oh, yum. That looks so good. The jam makes such a big difference, and just like adding some nuance to the photo.
Yeah, for sure. I went a little heavy on the jam, but.
Oh, well, Sandy says fruit scones are eaten with jam and cream, ideally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Or butter.
Yeah.
Which is nice, right? Very nice. I'm gonna go for the top-down shot here for a sec.
She says in the UK, there's a constant debate about what goes on first, though, the jam or the cream. Do you have a take on that?
I've always put the butter or the fat first, and then put the jam on the top. So that's sort of been the way I've done it. But
oh, that looks so good.
So there we are.
Yum.
So I'm going to take you over there to look at the other scones.
Okay.
Because I think we're probably a little short on time. But you can see they have the little crackling on
Oh,
top.
yeah. Those cracked in a different way than the normal flour. That's interesting.
And these would, I think, for my taste in terms of photography, these are actually more photogenic.
They're more interesting to look at.
Yeah, aren't they? So
yeah.
I don't know about texture. We can give that a little bit of a try here. Get you set up, and we'll test one out. And these are the gluten-free ones, so I don't have to be as careful around these. They're very crumbly. Well, they're a little drier.
Okay.
So
this is your first time making them gluten-free, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm not taste-wise, they have the right flavor.
Yeah.
And I think that you don't really eat them like that, right? You don't eat them dry. You usually eat them with something else, like cream or butter or
yeah. Or you're drinking them with your coffee, and you have something that's absorbing the dryness. Scones in general, typically are on the drier side because you're zhuzhing them up with something like jam or dipping them in something.
Yes. So I'm actually liking what we got there. I think that they taste great, and texture is nice. They're a little crumbly. It's probably going to be hard to spread butter on them until they get a little stale. But because right now, right out of the oven, they probably wouldn't handle the butter too well. But I think they're a success. I mean, they look great. They taste nice, and they are pretty representative of what a scone should be. So I'm happy with that. I also like that we had an opportunity to sort of troubleshoot a dark environment today, because it is dark out there. I mean, it is. We saw how dark it got in the kitchen, but also, I mean, it's pretty dark outside. So we pushed that camera a little harder than normal, but it handled it, and we had that little reflector trick, and I think it worked out well.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool.
I'll remind everyone before we sign off today that, again, this is the Work From Home Cafe. We have actually we have a landing page for all of our episodes now, and I'll drop it in the comments. So if you want to go back, this is episode 8 or 9. No, this is episode 9. Since quarantine, we launched April 1st, and Andrew and I are coming to you every Monday at 12 o'clock with new recipes. So if you're looking for something new to switch up at home this week, we have a whole class page with all of our episodes that I will be dropping right here for you guys to catch up with what we've been making.
So here's one thing I'll tell you about these. They feel traditional to me, but for my money, I would put a little extra sugar in them.
Oh, okay.
You know what? I think it wouldn't hurt the recipe in the slightest. And I think that if you put, instead of, what did we have? 6 tablespoons of sugar. I would go with 8 and just pump it up just a little, because I think that'll give it a little extra sweetness. Or if you wanted to, which is not what my grandmother used to do, is sprinkle some sugar on top before you put them in the oven. I've seen scones baked that way as well.
Yeah.
These haven't been done that way. And the other thing you could do if you wanted to get more color on them is put a little bit of cream wash on top of them before you put them in the oven, and they'll get a nice brown color. Okay. So I think, you can modify the recipe. I will not be offended. Grandma's long gone, so she won't yell at me. But I think we did a good job today. So
yeah, I think
if you wanted to play around with them, if you like them less sweet, make them the way I did them. And if you like them more sweet, then make them with a little bit extra sugar, and I think they'd be great.
All right, sounds good. I'm just dropping everybody our Work From Home Cafe so they can catch up with all of our previous episodes, and leave us some comments. Let us know what else you want to see us cooking in the coming weeks. We were talking with our other producers about maybe doing a smoked meat session. So we'll try to convince him to join us and teach us how to make some smoked meats. But we also want to know what you guys want to see us make. Andrew and I are both trying to find an eclectic group of recipes to teach you. So if you have a recipe you want to share with us and we can kind of navigate it on our own for the first time, we would love to do that. And thanks for joining us today. And like I said, I'm dropping a link to all of our previous episodes. And if you haven't gone to watch Andrew Scrivani's classes this week, classes in general, Andrew has a ton of amazing food photography classes on CreativeLive. I dropped a link to his first food photography class, but he has 2 new photography classes out. One is social media for food photography and mobile food photography, so you can improve your photos on your phone. So I highly recommend going to check those out.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It was another fun episode, and I will see you next week.
I'll see you next week, and thanks everyone. This was great. So see you next time. Bye.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Chase Jarvis, founder and CEO of CreativeLive. You all know that we have more than 2,000 classes and more than 10,000 hours of learning, inspirational, and motivational content on the platform. I'm super excited to announce a new experience on CreativeLive. It's called Fast Class. You've told us that you're busy and sometimes it's hard to dive into a full class from start to finish. So essentially, we're now giving you a shortened highlight version of our top CreativeLive classes. You can always dive into the full class with 5, 10, or 15 hours of great content. But now, if you're just looking to focus on a few of the highlights or want to be able to skip quickly to something that really interests you, you can now get a shortened fast class version of that class. We're also thinking this might be able to help you explore a new craft and save time while doing it. This is a great tool to curate your learning experience to help create the life that you seek. So you're probably thinking, great, how do I access this new experience on CreativeLive? That's easy. All you have to do is be a subscriber to the Creator Pass, and then all this is yours. If you're feeling isolated and looking for creative connection, try tuning into creativelive.com/TV. That's where we've got a 24/7 live stream from the kitchen counters.
I can do that backlit shot that I really like to do.
From the studios and living rooms of many of the world's top creators, where we're doing musical performances, Q&As, cooking shows, virtual book tour events, drawing, spoken word poetry, and more.
Life passed me by waiting for an invitation when the world is greater than my nation or my occupation. Be someone you've never been. You feel all that adrenaline, it's medicine.
It actually helps me feel like my days are more purposeful.
I hope that out of this deep pain will come some collective growth.
Dive into CreativeLive TV today.